So thank you, everybody. We are here to talk today about the Middle Eastern adventure traveler. And I know in my business with my clients, it's something that and the Asian market as a growth generalization is something that people have a lot of questions about, a lot of misconceptions about, I would say. At its basic form, I mean basic, operators often get excited because they hear, they take multiple trips a year, they take longer trips, the average spend per day is greater. Oh, amazing, tell me more. Well, that's all very basic, and the knowledge we have about the adventure market and what each source market defines as adventure is something we know varies amongst those source markets. Often associated by some sort of risk factor, some sort of niche market endeavor, often a cultural component. Those sort of things all combine to create what the offers are that we all come to the table with. But what we're here today to learn about are the more specifics from the experts on the panel on what the Middle Eastern adventure market looks like and what they're looking for. So we have a couple questions, but I'd like to start for the purposes of the panel to get a bit of a sense of who's in the audience. So can I get a show of hands for tour operators? Okay, great, thank you. Do we have any hoteliers with us today? Okay. And just destination representatives? Okay, great. Most importantly, who's currently working with the Middle Eastern adventure market? Okay, all right, so then that means there's lots of us with a lot to learn. Okay, I wanted to start with kind of a basic one. Can you guys give us some insight on what you would say some of the most common misconceptions are with respect to the Middle Eastern adventure market? Anybody, go ahead.
Sure.
My questions are on my phone, so forgive me if I look at it. I know it looks rude. It's not.
If I start from our side, our operation is based in Cairo, and we started with the outbound adventure traveling in 2011. Basically, it was post the Arab Spring. We were originally specialized in soft adventure for inbound coming into Egypt, and then we started to update our model as the Arab Spring hit tourism coming into Egypt. And one of the things we suffered from that there was not enough data about what is the nature of the Middle Eastern adventure traveler. Everybody had to do their own research, and we depended on knowing our travelers. And we, in the beginning, assumed that the adventure traveler coming from Egypt would very much like to go on, let's say, a well-organized standard trip. And what we found that we had more demand on the independent traveling, and that they would like to be involved in the planning. Actually, we thought before that they wanted a ready plan that they would jump on, but actually we found that they want to be involved in their in the planning stage and to influence more the kind of itinerary they would like to go on. And since then, our trend of working has been talking to our travelers and know what do they have in mind and how can we build on it with our product knowledge.
Interesting.
Well, there's two things really. I think the first would be, the first misconception is looking at the Middle East traveler as a whole, as like a one big entity. I think they're very unique. Every market has its own specificities. People in, let's say, the UAE might want to do something different to people in Egypt or Morocco. They might have different price points, different sensitivities. That would be the first thing. And probably the second thing is, the view is always a bit of a risk-averse market, soft adventures, and what we've realized recently that actually the propensity for people in the Middle East to do something really adventurous or really far out there is actually on the rise. I think more and more people want to go something far off the beaten track, do something a lot more adventurous, a lot more sort of remote, and less, like Manal was saying, on a rigid, organized sort of trip. So you're seeing a lot of that, and every market has its own unique sort of traveler, and that's a common misconception I feel people look at when they're addressing this market.
Can I ask if you don't, that's something that I find interesting because we do a lot of work with various markets, and as a Canadian who often gets lumped into the entire American market, and I can tell you the folly of that process. Is it something you'd all agree with, that the more propensity towards greater adventure is something true of this market?
Yeah, I think, first of all, to our foreign friends, welcome to Alain, welcome to the UAE, and to you all. I represent a destination management company based over here in the UAE, so I feel very privileged to be sitting here to welcome you to our home, along with the tourism boards who've been so kind to support. To answer your first question and your second question, the theme of the event is adventure in a new era. So I think the point that I'd like to make is here's a destination which focuses on understanding who is traveling and what adventure really means to them. Because that's very relative, isn't it? What adventure means to Manal may be what it means to me. I live on the border of Abu Dhabi, so adventure to me for today, being very relative, was my drive to Alain. My 6-year-old nephew, he does adventure travel because he loves to go on the world's fastest roller coaster at Ferrari World Abu Dhabi on Yas Island. My grandmother, God bless her, who lives with us, adventure for her over the weekend is experiencing that fantastic gold cappuccino at Emirates Palace Hotel in Abu Dhabi and enjoying high tea. And why not, yeah? So I think it's very relative. It depends who you're asking. But I think looking at adventure in a new era with the mindset and the IQ of an international traveler today, it's very important that we understand the demands and interests of where they're coming from and what they expect. And a lot of that responsibility lies on the destination and partners who they work with. And we're very blessed over here in the UAE because we believe in ensuring that, especially adventure travel, for a foreign visitor, the whole experience element goes to the degree of holding the destination accountable, ensuring it's responsible, and lastly, also sustainable. I think that's extremely important. We're very blessed to have authorities who hold operators like us accountable, who conduct regular checks to make sure that we're operating at international best practice standards, to make sure the adventure travel experience is fitting just about every budget, every pocket size. And I think that just goes back to what the earlier speakers were saying about the world shrinking. And I think that's the future.
Great, thank you. I wanted to know, do we have questions from the audience or shall we carry on? Where's Paul? Okay, thanks. Then I was curious to know what types of marketing that you've all found most successful with this market.
For us, it was digital marketing. We depended a lot on digital marketing, and we tried to connect with the international trends, but yet, again, know our local market. As I said, we started post-2011, and the type of adventure traveler that was interested in our trips were not the millennials, were the baby boomers. And they came into adventure because for them, they were looking for some sort of rejuvenation. They wanted to, it was a mindset for them. They wanted to take off, leave behind all the troubles that were home, and they wanted to look for something new. And that's where adventure travel came in. It was more interaction with nature, it was more interaction with culture, and a bit less physical activity. And we had to know how to speak the language. And for us, the platform that was extremely successful was Facebook. Even though numbers worldwide are saying that Facebook is coming less influencer as a platform for digital marketing, but for us in Egypt and for other parts of the Arab world, it was extremely influential, even more than Google AdWords, for example. And we depended on that, on doing campaigns, on reaching out, and again, looking at keywords that would then attract them and also help us to speak their language and then carry on forwards. And with comparing all the different digital platforms, Facebook was definitely the most successful one for us.
And for you both?
Contrary to almost juxtaposed to what I was saying about each person in the Middle East being unique, each market being unique, I think something in common with the Middle East is the community. There's a strong sense of community. Anywhere you go in the Middle East, you'll find people are well networked. People know each other really well. If you bring up a certain business or a certain person, people will know who that person is and they'll gravitate towards that person. So I think a lot of our main focus was word of mouth. I mean, that's a really strong thing in the Middle East. If people like what you offer, and if they value your company and they value your values and your ethics, that goes a long way in this region, because people really trust trusted opinions. So if I trust someone's opinion, I gravitate towards it. I may try that product, I may try that trip, I may go on that trip. So that word of mouth was really big for us. On the other hand, there's also community engagement, which I think is really picking up in the Middle East, organizing short hikes, short little events, bringing people living in the same places with similar interests together, and that builds a community for you, and you work to service that community. So community engagement for us has been the real driver in the last few years. As a small company, it's easier to organize, it's obviously more affordable, and it's also a great way to bring like-minded individuals into the same place, not only outbound, but in where they live. So on the weekends, on the Friday afternoon, taking a short hike, that does really that's been the most effective form of marketing for us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with the two of them. Digital is the way to go, and constantly reminding folks out there that the offerings of a destination are so varied. So I'm not an outdoor guy personally, but my wife is. So can we holiday together? Absolutely, yes. So if your story is like mine, can you do that in the UAE? Absolutely, yes, because you have those offerings, right? I just gave examples earlier when I was explaining my own personal situation. So constantly reminding folks out there that yes, you can have the best of both. I think that first question is perfect. Can we just touch on that very first one?
I think it's a twofold question though, and I think you've attacked the first part of it, but I'm curious to know about then the types of products. I think that's the most important.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. And talking from a live case study, so the brief we got as a DMC was, listen, here are a bunch of high rollers, 15 of them, they live out of their offices and their laptops, and they don't just see anybody. They've got zero people skills, and they've got to go away and just enjoy a holiday experience. And can we do that in the UAE? And the answer to them was absolutely yes. And because time is of such an essence for them, they just had 3 days with them on the ground, right? And these were high rollers coming from different parts of the world. So how did we address that? So we got them to stay for one night. We gave them a different experience every day during their trip in the UAE. So for one night, we had them sleep in the laps of luxury at the Yas Viceroy Hotel on Yas Island, the only hotel built on a Formula One racetrack, right? The second night, we took them to the desert in Abu Dhabi. Weather was beautiful. This was October 4 years ago, where they camped in the desert. And on their last night, so from an air-conditioned, super luxurious room to a fantastic campsite in the desert, out in the open. On the last night, we took them to sub-zero temperatures at Ski Dubai, an indoor ski dome in Dubai. So that was pretty amazing, and that was adventure for them. These folks who were CFOs of a big multinational brand. So if that can answer that question about how do you pitch that, and this destination just worked out for them because it just ticked all the boxes. Yeah, I just wanted to share that with the audience.
Now, you're both, Manal and Ahmed, your destinations are quite different. Mm-hmm. What products would you find most speak to this market from your observations?
Well, from our own experience, I think hiking has been really our main sort of product that people, especially for beginners, people who have never really done adventure travel, it's a new industry and a lot of people are growing into it. So you'll find that offers more of an entry point for lots of people who want to get into doing more active sort of things. But we feel like the most product is not really essentially one thing. It's, people want to get away from what they're experiencing day to day. Cairo is a huge city. It's crowded. You want to get people outside of that zone. You want to get them in somewhere with nature. You want to get them into a different sort of setting. And I think that's the kind of product that really appeals to people. I think they want to experience something different from their day-to-day life. And especially with the new wave of active young people are in the region are way more active, way more fit, and they want to have a bit of both. They want to go outside, they want to be active, and they want to see something different in nature.
Okay.
For us, the interest has always been in the snow and rain. Our type of clientele was looking for something totally different than what they have back home. Again, they're looking for the soft adventure, and snow and rain was the state of mind that offered them the idea of what other adventures can they do. And that's why Europe has always been a very popular destination for our travelers. It's close, it's a short-haul flight, budget is reasonable, of course, until we had the devaluation of the currency, and same time zone, people in Egypt would be speaking French and English, so it was attractive from all points of view. And even in the summertime, Europe stayed popular, even there was no snow and rain, but it also offered other activities, which was then would be by the hiking, for example. But always the focus point has been the snow and rain.
Interesting. Again, I just came from so much snow and rain. So I recently did a project in Belarus about medical tourism. So I'm curious to know if anyone here, there's a question here that if anyone's noticed a trend towards combining adventure tourism and medical travel.
We've seen the demand on medical tourism, but we have not seen them being combined.
Okay.
And it depends where is the demand coming from. So we've seen demand on travelers coming into Egypt to do medical tourism. We've seen different clinics and doctors and physicians trying to combine this kind of program. But what we've seen was the combination between medical tourism and cultural tourism, where things will be extremely, very low paced, and it also depends on why they're coming on board for medical tourism. When we've seen the demand, for example, from Saudi travelers wanting to go out on medical tourism, we've seen it stand alone. We've not seen it with any kind of combination. That's why the source market of who is the traveler requesting the medical tourism will then influence what do they want to combine along with it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Manal. The crossover is here to stay, and it's for us as destination management companies, as destinations to capitalize on it and just increase the offering. Yeah?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. And what about, so we've talked about products, we haven't talked about specific destinations are most interesting.
We've seen the demand on Europe, but after the visas got more complicated and after the currency devaluation, we've seen more interest coming in Asia, in countries as Malaysia, as Thailand. We've seen a big shift in demand on it for the last 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. I think Asia, especially the flights, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, flying regularly to capitals in Asia has really pushed sort of the frontier for that. And a lot of people from the Middle East are now flocking towards that. I mean, in different types of things. You have people going for their honeymoons, you have people going for their own adventures. Even adventure honeymoons is a new and upcoming thing in the Middle East. So Asia would be the market, really. People see a lot of value in going there, and it's a completely different sort of environment for them to see, to do their trip. You know, it's a completely different place. You can see beaches, jungles, mountains, sort of in a very short span of time, and that really appeals to people.
Right. What's your top sort of destinations that you're referring to?
I would say Nepal is a very popular destination. Thailand's also a very popular destination. Bali, Malaysia, each with its own unique market, and people flock to different things depending on the type of consumer they are. But I think definitely there's been more of a trend to go to the Asia direction in the last few years.
Okay. So there's a question here, what are the biggest problems that Middle Eastern travelers face when they're traveling with respect to food or comfort? It's also touches on a question we all spoke about earlier, which are sort of maybe the creature comforts that this market might be looking for. Do you have any tips for the audience on how to address that? I know it's a question we get often with respect to the Asian market.
Sure.
I'm inbound, so.
I would say, food is a big issue, but a lot of the countries now cater for that, and anyone who goes around will know that the type of travelers coming and destinations usually accommodate for the food. The one thing we really try to focus on, because a lot of people who travel in the Middle East might be beginners, this might be their first adventure trip, it might be their first hike, it might be their first safari. So people focus a lot on like the info sessions beforehand, because you want the unknown to be the experience itself. You don't want the person going to be bogged down in like what they need to wear, what's the kind of gear they'll need, if it's a hike or if it's a climb or if it's something like that. So we really want to focus on kind of providing that information and taking that unknown out off the table. And that'll make people much more relaxed and more open to doing something outside their comfort zone, especially when you've taken out the element of what do I need to wear, what's the gear like, if I'm going in the snow, how cold is it going to be. If you provide people that sort of information or even do a pre-hike around where they live, it makes them more comfortable, and then you make the unknown what they get to see, and I think that makes the traveler here in the region really comfortable to go.
Right.
Actually, there are two questions, and I think I might tie them. I mean, one is asking about the comforts, and the other one is asking about who's the adventurer, who's the outbound Middle East adventure traveler. And indirectly, they do connect because, again, what we've done a lot of segmentation to know who is our traveler, and it cannot be one group. We know who's our traveler that's coming from Egypt, who's our traveler that's coming from the Saudi Arabia, and who are the expats that are flying from the region. For each one of them, we create a persona to understand what are their interests, and within their interests, it will be the areas of comfort, or what are the things they are willing to negotiate or to forego, and it does not become an obstacle, and what are the must things. And within this, these questions will be the idea or the issue of halal food, which we have seen become an obstacle for some travelers and not for other travelers, because the extent to how you define halal food and halal services differs from one culture to another. Even though religiously we are bound by the same concept, but there are cultural differences that then influences the destinations. So far, the most difficulties we've seen has been in Europe, and the less difficulties have been in Asia. Countries like Malaysia has been extremely cooperative on offering halal services. And actually, when you look at how Malaysia has started this, you go back to 9/11, when all the Gulf travelers shifted their trends from going into USA into going into Asia. And Malaysia immediately picked up on that trend and kept developing itself to be known as a halal-friendly destination. And that's why a lot of demand has been going not just from North Africa, but also from the GCC countries.
So I think that's clever, and that's something that I think probably too few operators do with the persona. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Personas at the beginning look extremely easy, but then as you start working on it, you hit a wall, because basically you realize you're trying to imagine your perfect traveler, which you don't know that much about, and you're trying to get to know better. And we realized at one stage, the first persona we created and trying to imagine who's our client was totally far away from reality. We created something that did not exist. It's a client who will immediately trust us, follow on the right time payments, take our information for the destination. It doesn't happen this way. They will go for the online trend. It didn't happen this way. And that's why we went back to the travelers who came with us, and we started to see how can we combine them and create on that. And it's dynamic. We keep changing it season by season, because again, being from a region where there's a lot of, in some parts, there are a lot of political instability, it does affect how we travel. And that's why we've realized we have to visit our personas, realize there's the stage of dreaming and thinking, I want to go to this destination and I would enjoy myself there. Then there's the reality, I cannot go to that destination. How are you going to replace it? And that's why we tried with creating the personas, including the demographics, the interests, the areas of where to reach them for digital marketing and so forth. And then we keep changing it as we move from one segment to another.
Right. Anybody else?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I would say, going back to what Nouri was mentioning earlier about who's the traveler and who they are, I think for a lot of the Western world, that is the baby boomer generation. But I think really for the Middle East, you're seeing a lot of growth in the Gen X generation, people who've worked a lot, been exposed a lot to the internet generation. And that generation is really driving this movement and pushing millennials to kind of join this wave of travel. So the Gen X are usually have more disposable income, more time now to travel, and when they choose to have their free time, that's what they want to do, and that's kind of driving the industry.
There's a question here that addresses expectations from the market when they travel specific to Southeast Asia. In fact, I think that's a fair question to ask with respect to all of your destinations. Is there a gap that you need to bridge with respect to destination expectations and realities? Is there an education component that's required in your marketing? Talk a little to that.
Definitely there's an educational component, but we try to address it by thinking, how are we supporting creating a sustainable, responsible traveler. And we try to put this in the literature we share with our travelers in managing their expectations, because sometimes the expectations are too high or not realistic. It comes around the level of hospitality, what to expect from the food. These were the two main things that we work around. And that's why we push our older travelers to share their reviews and to share their experiences. We connect the travelers with each other so they then can exchange some tips about the destination, about working with us, and then to give them other advice. So some we let to go organic, and other advice we build in for our traveler to help them manage their expectations for the destination.
I think two things really. Building the community really helps, because when people go on these adventures and there is a sense of community, people that manages expectations in and of itself, because the word spreads and people understand more. And for things that are new for people, and so it's a really growing industry that's pretty young. Providing information as the company does help people settle in and manages their expectations. They know what to get, and leaves them with more time to focus on the experience that they're signed up for, rather than the comfort level or what to expect, or the snowy conditions or the rainy conditions. So that really helps, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, from an inbound perspective, I think getting that communication out there is extremely important. And what's great is that the message, as a destination, I think we get that messaging right. The tourism boards invest a lot in that. We, as a DMC partner, collaborate a lot with them to make sure this messaging gets pushed across, so that it opens the destination to just about every pocket. And I think that's very important. Mm-hmm. Adventure travel doesn't necessarily have to be month-long. I go back to saying that time is of essence, and why can't it be customized to cater to you and my busy lifestyle? It absolutely can, I think. And we focus on making sure that goes out very clearly, yeah.
There's a question with respect to whether or not Middle Eastern travelers travel independently or through travel agents. And I think we've already identified that we're talking in two
Yes.
gross generalities here. So perhaps you could address specific markets within this huge umbrella and give us some insight there.
For our clientele, who are more from the baby boomers, they prefer the itinerary that will come through a travel agent or a tour operator. They want to be part of building this itinerary. They want it to be flexible, but they would depend on the tour operator. For the younger generation, we've seen more independent trends in their booking, especially when it came to booking accommodation. So actually, they might do some part of the booking through the tour operator or the travel agent, and the other would be done independently. And that's why, again, there are so different trends according to the age group and background that we're looking at.
I would agree. I would say you got a lot of solo travelers who, that was mentioned in the session before. You are seeing a trend in people traveling solo, but they do want to join a group. They do want to meet with a new group of people who have similar interests, and that really helps. And I would agree with what Manal said, that there is a generational divide, and maybe the baby boomers would prefer to go through the travel agents and the tour operators. And as you go down, you would see people more flocking to do things based on specific interests and trying to link up with like-minded people.
Right.
Yeah, and this is where the accountability quotient comes into play, because when you go through a travel agent or a tour operator or a destination management company, then you get that accountability factor, because that also answers the question of those what-if moments, right? What if something goes wrong, and what if you miss your flight, and what if you run into insurance claims and things like that? And then you can always bank on a travel agent or a tour operator or a destination management company. So I think that's the trend. That's what we're seeing, yeah.
There's a question here I'm going to add to it. With respect to the most effective ways for an operator to market to the luxury clientele, first, I'm curious to know if you can estimate what percentage you're seeing of luxury, and then how do you access that market?
I would say luxury is depending on where you are in the Middle East, it's kind of hard to kind of pinpoint, because every market has its own specifics. But there is definitely a luxury clientele there. And I would say, for the most part, where we see a lot of the sort of luxury adventure combining is honeymoons. A lot of people want to kind of experience this for the first time with a significant other. It's kind of a landmark moment, and we're seeing a lot of that in the segment, and also makes more sense for price-sensitive customers to pay more if it's a once in a lifetime sort of opportunity. Sure. But there is a lot of space there. How you market it would be I would definitely focus on the experience. I mean the comfort level and the accommodation is important, but the experience as a whole, that's why they're flocking to do this specific adventure. It's not necessarily the hotel or where they're staying. It's the thing as a whole, the experience as a whole.
We've seen more, the demand has always been less rough rather than give us luxury. That has always been, because the mindset, if adventure would be backpacking, and it doesn't have to be, and that's again part of educating the travelers. And when we got demand on luxury, we aim to direct them towards eco-lodges or lodges that will have sustainable practices and how to create that as a trend for their itinerary. So yes, there is a demand, but we try to shift it a bit to fulfill our role on sustainability. And I think it's all about the message. It's all about what kind of literature, what message you're going to get out for the client. If they're coming to focus more on the accommodation, or is it about the itinerary that they're coming out? And the more transparent you are about the itinerary and less surprises they have on the way, it will still attract the luxury traveler, even if it will not be a 5-star deluxe product, but they would want the 5-star experience, which has to be authentic. So there's a level to how much you can orchestrate this experience. But again, that's why I say it's a combination between transparency, a clear message on accommodation, and trying to make them change their perspective on what kind of accommodation they can use.
And on that, I know there's sort of, often you'll see operators can develop their product with sort of product and experience first, hotel second, or you can take a hotel first approach and then build around it. Is one more successful with this market? Again, gross generalization?
No, we haven't seen that. No, I personally have not witnessed that trend our side.
Okay.
I would still put weighted on the product, especially for people moving into the adventure travel versus regular travel. I think the focus would be on the product itself, and then the accommodation would come second. Not that it's unimportant, it's just it comes second.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a question often asked.
Yeah, and luxury over here, from our perspective as a destination management company which focuses on inbound traffic to the UAE, it is twofold. It's not just over the top. It's also value for money, and you get that. So you've got the international budget hotels, if I can use that phrase loosely, but they've got the Middle Eastern, Asian hospitality touches infused into it. So a Premier Inn in the West is not, the experience over here in the UAE is completely different. A Holiday Inn Express in the UK by the highway versus a Holiday Inn Express over here in the UAE gives you a completely different experience. To start with, the size of the rooms itself, right? So that just changes the dynamics altogether of what the destination has to offer. But I think I absolutely agree with Manal. We're in an age where we cannot over-communicate enough because the traveler is asking that, right? And it's there, right? Why not? So we've got to get that messaging right constantly.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a question here. Is the Middle Eastern traveler, in fact, looking for shopping as many might think?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Definitely, yes.
It's always an important component, and you can put information about a trail that you're going to spend 48 hours along that trail, but then you have to mention in the city where's the mall located.
Okay.
So
no,
it cannot be left out of any planning, definitely.
Okay. And I mean, maybe this is often your background as well with respect to community tourism. Are community-based tourism initiatives, is it something being asked for? Is it something you tend to put in as a matter of practice? How does that work?
Yeah, that's definitely on the rise for us because we're focusing on attracting visitors year-round, not just during our tourist season, which is September all the way till April. And with more and more avenues opening for visitors to experience in the UAE, it's just helped us in getting our messaging right, in endorsing our information. So what happens during our summer months is that as a brand, we partner with the tourism boards to focus on getting social travel moving into the UAE. So we go out and target special interest groups. What do I mean by that? Student groups, senior citizen travel, and going into those cultural travel segments. And also making them aware that the destination becomes so much more affordable, right? Yes, it's peak summer, but we're not crazy. We don't hold hands and walk outside. You know, everything is air conditioned. We're very blessed that way. Even the bus stops in the country are air conditioned. So, so we try to create that image that A, it's so much more affordable. B, you can actually now aspire to go travel to the UAE. Because there's so much more for you to do from a cultural angle, from a social angle, from a luxury angle, and it's also much more affordable. And it also coincides, fortunately, with the holiday season in most of the markets that we're attracting, so yeah.
So that speaks to the next question of what are those months?
That's right. So connecting to what I just said, it's those peak summer months that we look at. So right from early May till September.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a question here for you specifically, Ahmed, and it refers to whether or not the Middle Eastern market's ready for online review websites. So perhaps you can talk about what role that plays in your marketing, if any at all.
No, it definitely plays a role. I think there's a lot of online engagement by the Middle East clients. So we're very engaged online. You'll see a lot of reviews, and that does link a bit to word of mouth. It does have a certain link. I think they're growing. I think people in the Middle East are generally very intensive in terms of their social media. Their opinions are heard. They communicate a lot. So I do think they are ready for online review websites. I think there are already a few. They haven't grown, like particularly huge like the US, but they're there. They're on that path. So I would expect in the next few years we'll see a lot more of that.
And they also customize language-wise, so that's always helpful.
Yeah. Right. So what are the sites you're focusing on at the moment? Can you share?
Well, I would agree with Manal's comments earlier that Facebook is still the major medium. It's still where most of your consumers are there, and it's the best way to communicate your messages. But there could be independent sites that grow off of that in the near future, I think.
I think we have time for one more. I don't know what Bill Gates would look for. Not really sure, but curious about the average number of outbound adventure holiday makers from UAE. Perhaps it's the breakdown between expats versus local Emiratis in UAE. Perhaps that's the meaning there. That's the breakdown.
I mean, I don't have access to numbers on outbound or adventure holiday makers, but we've seen a rise on the expat interest, expats coming from the UAE. The demand we've seen was on a combination between Egypt and Jordan, and also Oman.
I think for us, we operate both outbound from Egypt and the UAE, and I think a larger portion of our clientele is from the UAE. I do think, there are, of course, plenty of people from around the Middle East living in the UAE, working in the UAE. But that's generally the base, I think, where there is a lot of travelers in the Emirates for sure.
Right. Okay.
I can only comment on the second community over there, the expat community. So yeah, we get 2 months off in our peak summer months. Schools are closed. So the ones who stay back and have a staycation, they get in touch with us, and we have programs for them where the ones who haven't been out of their city, there are 7 cities which make up, there are 7 Emirates which make up the United Arab Emirates. Those who haven't been to the neighboring cities, we encourage them, and there are programs for them to participate in, so yeah.
Okay. Right.
There was a question earlier, if you don't mind, about community-based tourism, because that was asked twice. And when our client comes and asks about community-based tourism, we always ask them, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Because the definition is so wide.
Yeah.
So, for example, the demand we get when they say community-based tourism is on volunteer tourism or voluntourism. And we've seen a lot of changes on how to offer and serve volunteerism, especially about the product itself. I mean, we've seen the trend in some Asian countries where it ended up being called orphanage tourism because it was not real, it was not authentic, and people were just standing and posing and thinking they have done the activity. So we asked them, do you mean by that, do you want to volunteer? How many hours do you need to volunteer? Is it taking a major part of your trip? Or do you mean you want to be more of a local home stay? We try to get the sense of it, and then according to what are they interested in, how many hours, which portion of the trip it would take, we can then advise which decision they would go on. And we've seen this very high trend mainly for students from international schools because this is part of their high school education. So it's a must for them to complete their diplomas or before they graduate from school to serve that part. For the independent travelers, it ends up being an activity that's done along their tour, and that's why we do not define it at the end as a volunteerism or community-based tourism.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely students, I think, yes, they do want to go out there and really experience an authentic experience, helping people, and especially maybe students and university students are really engaged in that sort of thing. It's more affordable for them.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's it for our questions, unless anyone else had anything else to share. Thank you. I think it's build your persona. I think that's the takeaway. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.